Okay. All right, Ryan, thanks for coming. It's the 17th of August, and we're here to talk about your final CAS interview. Thank you very much for the PowerPoint that you've sent me, and I'm going to invite you to talk to your PowerPoint to tell us why you feel that you have completed each of the learning objectives. So, over to you, Ryan.
So as for the learning objective 1, identify your own strength and develop areas for growth. I've shown this through my activity on the violin, so my activity in the art. So to identify my own strength is that I have, a strong bow control and, a strong musical interpretation. However, my areas for growth is my, my trilling techniques and my finger coordination and my vibrato. So what I've done is, I've particularly developed on these areas of growth to make them a bit stronger and just make my overall playing a bit sound. And as for the activity of golf, strength is, I can maybe hit a long way with a driver, and I always have the ability to keep a calm mindset under difficult situations.
Yeah.
However, my areas for growth, which I need to work on, is my putting techniques and my general short game.
Mm-hmm. If we could just pause there. For your violin, I noticed that you put in your reflections that you were going to learn several pieces, including Four Seasons and so on. Have you learned them, and how do you know you've learned them?
I have learned them. Definitely have learned them. In terms of how I've learned them, well, I have done recordings of myself with those pieces.
Yeah.
And I think I can play those pieces through without any, hiccups. So everything is smooth when I go through the piece, and I can memorize them as well.
Do you have a tutor, a teacher for violin?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. And what about golf? Do you have golf lessons, or you just play for fun? Tell me a bit more about golf.
Yes, I do have golf lessons, and in those lessons, I'll talk to my teacher and work on my the areas of the game in which I have which I need growth on.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's we've got 7 learning objectives to get through. So let's move on to LO2, please. Tell me about that.
In terms of LO2, demonstrating that challenge has been undertaken, developing new skills in process. So in violin, again, that challenge is sort of my trilling technique. In a sense, it's just my finger.
Well, what is trilling? I don't play.
It's like this really fast pressing on one note and pressing it really quickly.
Okay.
And just it's this shift between the two notes that it's going to occur really quickly, and it's going to just add a lot more integrity to the music.
Yeah.
And sometimes this actually occurs with lots of people, is that they can't seem to have a trill that's really quick.
Yeah.
So you really have to train the ability of your fingers to make them, really quick. And so what I did was I used stress balls.
Yes.
To improve, the strength of my fingers. And I also simply worked on having a clearer trill every single day, maybe 1 hour each day, where I just work really hard on trying to improve this ability in my fingers. And for golf, the challenge for me is avoiding 3 putts, and trying to ensure my chipping has always been within a 1.5 meters radius from the hole. And what I do is I spend around 1 to 2 hours on the driving range each week, and I'll just hit a lot of balls and set myself a goal of for these 10 balls I must hit maybe 9 of them within a 1.5 meter radius, or for 5 putts or 10 putts I can never do a 3 putt. Once I've achieved those goals, it just helps me to develop a lot more.
And do we have evidence that your golf has improved, maybe your scorecard or your handicap? Okay, great. Let's move on to LO3 then.
Yeah, for the LO3, how to initiate and plan a CAS experience. Well, in terms of initiating my violin experience, I set myself the goal to practice, the pieces of, the Four Seasons, the Butterfly Lovers Concerto, because, when I've heard those pieces, I thought they sound really good, and that sort of prompted me to initiate the experience. And then plan, so in the CAS, I set myself strict timelines, which I must have a certain student goal completed within a time period. So, for instance, when I practice Butterfly Lovers Concerto, today I'll work on this section, and I, set myself the goal that I must be able to play this section, without any, hiccups or just fluently. So, by practicing either specific sections or just a piece in general, it's just, helped me to, stick to a, good timeline.
Okay, good. Let's move on to LO4.
Four.
Now, you've talked a lot about violin and golf, so I'd like to hear about other things, like the volunteer house building program.
So for the volunteer house building program, so in Cambodia, we spent about 4 to 5 hours each day on the construction of the house, and just continued for a period of 5 days. And we were constantly working in the process under the heat, and we were helping out with hammering the nails and layering and mixing the concrete for the basement of the house, and as well as the construction of the frame and staircase. So that's our commitment and our perseverance is that we continued work despite a strict time. We were working off a strict timeline, and we it's also really high temperatures outside. How we just continued to do so. I think we've persevered.
Yeah. What would you recommend to someone who is to do the Cambodia trip in future? It might not happen this year, but hopefully in future years it will return. What would be some things that you would do differently now that you've been to Cambodia and done that volunteer work?
So, I think in terms of suggestions for other people going into Cambodia, I think they should be a bit more fearless when they approach this experience. I think they should embrace it a lot more. Like, do not, in a sense, be too afraid. Like, in terms of, you still have to be careful, but don't be too afraid of the many things that you are going to try. I think just open yourself up a bit more and just get the best out.
Excellent. Okay, great. Let's move on to LO5 then, Ryan. You've put in your PowerPoint here about Cambodia, but what about the string quartet now? I know you do a lot of music.
So as for the string quartet, so we're definitely it's the skill of working collaboratively that's really important to this ensemble. So because in a string quartet, we each have very different parts, and those parts interconnect together to make a very good piece of music. So in terms of that, we have to develop our blend, our tuning, and our dynamics have to be really coordinated, and our rhythmic pulse have to be really together, and to to produce a well balanced musical sound. And I am also the leader of the string quartet, so I have to in a sense make really clear gestures about certain changes that's going to occur inside the music. And the benefits is it allowed us to become a better ensemble in general. The sound quality is much better, and we can be a lot more expressive, and we can understand each other a bit more. So it's really quite good.
Okay. Have there been sort of performance difficulties with COVID this year? Have you had fewer performances, or maybe performances with no audience? And what's happened there?
This year, of course, like we had performances with no audience, and we just generally had fewer performances, because normally for the string quartet, we'll play for like a bit of community event as well, and we'll play for certain school. We'll play for just a lot of school events that we are not just able to perform this year.
Okay, good. Let's move on to LO6, and we've got 2 more learning objectives to look at. I see for LO6 you've mentioned sort of 2 different aspects of Cambodia, which is not surprising because we're looking at global significance here. So tell me more about that.
So in terms of when I went to Cambodia, I realized the global issue of the HIV, the proliferation of HIV in developing countries, and how many people, due to like insufficient supply of these drugs, are dying like really young, and many orphanages are not willing to take on some of these children. So what I've engaged with, we went to an orphanage that particularly takes care of these children and gives them drugs, and I played with them, we taught them in classes, and we even renovated some buildings for them, painting some of the walls, and giving them like a quote that's going to motivate them through the day. And it's this engagement, it allows me to see that there's still hope into improving the supply of drugs, because these kids living in the orphanage, they're living under perfectly sufficient supply, and they can live a normal age. So which I think it has sort of really motivated me to continue and maybe trying to help out.
Yeah, that's great. Well done, Ryan.
Yeah.
Now, finally, then on to LO7 and the ethics of your choice and actions. So tell us just a little bit about that.
So, in terms of when I went to Cambodia, as we've built houses for the people, and we are giving them like a good shelter to live under. I think my actions are ethically justified in providing better living quality for the family in poor conditions.
Yeah.
And also by playing with the children and trying to inspire them in classrooms and just motivate them generally in life and bringing them a bit of happiness. I think it's also quite ethically justified and sound.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for this meeting today and for all your reflections that I can see on ManagePack. You can stop the recording now if you like.